We're the 15th of November 2022, and where I find myself empirically in Alsace, in France. It's 29:40 broadly, and I intend to make a video which will be at least 2 hours long to introduce my new documents, my new working tools, the tools that I intend to use for my work when I speak publicly, when I make videos, but I've also printed them on paper, and I sometimes, when I talk to people, I use them to communicate my ideas. So I will begin by a brief formal explanation or presentation. I know that when people communicate on the internet, potentially the knowledge which is the content which is being shared can be is accessible to everyone, potentially to everyone with an internet connection. Potentially, as far as I know, broadly 4 billion people, as of now, broadly. But then there are the limitations of language, of culture, intelligence, the topics which are being discussed, etc., etc. But the knowledge, the content, can be potentially accessed by anyone and everyone. That's why we live in an age where that's what is called the global village. People can communicate directly with everyone else, but at this moment very few people, and no one actually except myself is aware of this. I'm the only person who is aware of this. That's why I can address anyone, but I'm not sure when the person that I am addressing will get, or if she or will get my video. So that's why here I speak just to no one in particular. Maybe the people who have been following my videos and who are broadly aware of what I'm talking about. So yeah, that was for the first one. The second, as an individual, my name is Luca Goetz. I know that I improve intellectually every day. We are the 15th of November. It means that everything that I have said or thought or done in my public sharing of content, as well as in my life, when I look back, that's what I say in most of my recent videos, when I look back, I understand more, but also I'm kind of skeptical in the ordinary sense, in the sense that I'm not very satisfied, because from my newly acquired perspective, I am more intelligent, sometimes more wise, I am wiser, more intelligent, I have more experience, more maturity, not always, but yeah, it makes me look back on my past with kind of disappointment, bitterness, sometimes resentment, anger, frustration, because the more smarter I become, the wiser I become, retrospectively, my life, intellectual or ordinary life, looks like a disappointment and a failure because of the new perspective. Yeah, that's part of the frustration of growing up intellectually and maturing. The good aspect is that I really become more intelligent every day, and I am capable of expressing my ideas more clearly, more simply, and I grow more confident, in a way, in my ability. Yeah, that's what I wanted to say. Okay, so what I intend to talk about in this video, I want to talk about God. What else? I made briefly a plan. I do not follow a script in my videos. I have taken this decision in order to be more authentic, but it's not completely random. Sometimes it is, but this video is not completely random. I have a very simple structure in 8 points, but I will not read a script, and I do not edit my videos, which is a reason for the lack of success of my videos, because people expect a great formal presentation, but it's more authentic in a sense that if I made mistakes, if I said stupid things, if the light or the frame is not good, if I it's at least this is how things happen in real time as I record the video. So what I intend to talk about, UPS, universal particular singular, which are the logical determinations of the concept, which is another word for God, a philosophical language for God. So I will talk about UPS. Yeah, I will show the table board. I will briefly comment, or not so briefly, I will reuse this as a working tool. This is very useful. I will introduce a few books that I have been reading, whose teachings I've been applying, and that I recommend people to read or to become aware of. I will briefly talk about ethics, what I have been doing over the past few days, weeks, months, and what I advise people to do. I will present the phenomenal appearance of Geist or spirit, namely how the spirit of humans, the consciousness of humans, but also the consciousness of God, spirit, appears and is being manifested in mostly the Western world, but actually the UPS will show that the spirit is universal, but it is through the particular aspect of the Western world that the spirit of God eventually becomes conscious of itself. Then I will present my view about logic, which is the mind of God simplified. It's a simplified presentation. The presentation of nature, which is the spatio-temporal world, the world in which I live as a human being, in which everyone lives, the world of time, space, matter, movement, energy, the cosmos, if you will. And finally, the presentation of the categories which structure what I call a human society. This is simply the presentation of Geist or spirit, namely the consciousness of humans. These are the working tools that I intend to use. I will maybe slightly modify, reorganize with more details, more different structure, but these are the working tools that I have been using for myself and to communicate with others, and I intend to keep using them. So I will use this opportunity, this video, for a couple of hours to introduce them in an accessible way, but with slight intellectual complexity nonetheless. So this is broadly the structure. When the video is done, I will put in the description below the structure, the 8 points with the time, so that people can access more easily. So yeah, okay, it's been 7 minutes, and let's say 8 minutes. This is the formal introduction. Now I will talk about UPS. I will try to change the camera so that we see. Do we see? This is part of the non-editing process. Okay, briefly comment. Yeah, the universal is that which in ordinary language, in the English language, we call general. That which applies to all, to everything. Universal is what universally valid. It's valid for everyone at any time, in any place. That's the formal definition of universality in philosophy. And the universal contains under itself particularities, that which in biology we would call this the genus and the species. The species constitute the genus. They are particularization of a genus. The particulars, it's in ordinary English language, the words that are used to express in ordinary vocabulary the logical determination of particularity are variety, kind, type. What kind of book is it? What kind of job do you do? What kind of person is he? That's a particularization. The variety, a variety of fruits, a variety of activity, a variety of I don't know in which field this word is used, but variety, a kind, a type, these are ordinary words to express the logical determination of universality, namely all the species of a genus, all the types of an object, or all the varieties of whatever is being varied, These are particularities. And the singulars, they are logically to the particular what the particular is to the universal, namely, each particularity contains under itself singulars, which is another word for objects, individuals, objects, or concrete. What is singular is fully determined, namely, it is real in the sense of wirklich, it's actual, it's concrete, it's fully determined, it exists in the ordinary sense of the word, whereas the particular and the universal, they do not exist in the sense they cannot be sensed, touched, felt, and here the classical example. Now I've showed the picture now with pick up the camera again. Hopefully it's clear. I will not make editing. Do we see? Okay. Yeah. So. Yeah. Do we see? Yeah. This is the structure of all objects and of all human beings and of everything, even God himself, because that's what it means when humans are made in the image of God, or all things are made in the image of God. Namely, what we call things in ordinary language, these are singular objects, individual objects, concrete objects, which are the singularization of a universal. Each singular book contains in itself the idea of a book, each singular horse, each singular car, each singular vegetable contains in itself the idea of horses, cars, books, vegetables, etc., etc. And a simple, here, that's maybe my intellectual improvement, what I understood many years ago that now I've understood that people do not spontaneously understand, that, for instance, it's impossible to eat a fruit in general. There are no fruits in general, there are only kinds or varieties or types of fruits. Strawberries, blueberries, oranges, apples, peaches, bananas, mangoes, watermelons, etc., etc. The universal will be fruits, the particulars will be the various varieties or species in biological language of fruits, and each singular fruit is not just a fruit, it is a fruit through the mediation of a particular variety. It's impossible to eat a fruit in general. It's impossible to eat an orange in general. There are only singular oranges, and each singular fruit exists through the mediation of a particularity. It works for everything. In the human world, a human being is a singular human being with particularities, but they are inherent in him or in her, namely each singular human being carries within himself, that's ordinary language to make this intelligible, particularities, and they are not randomly attributed. I will show this in my presentation of Geist, if you watch the video a little bit later. But here, simplified example, each singular individual, every human being that has ever lived, that will ever live, that has ever existed, is first determined, let us say, in terms of ethnic identity, namely each singular human has a particular genetic determination. There are no human beings in general. Every human being has a particular genetic determination. The classical genetic divides, which are called races, are European Caucasoid, Sub-Saharan African, Northeast Asian, etc., etc. There are officially 10 genetic clusters, as they call this. These are races. This is an example. Then there is gender. Every human being is either male or female from a biological standpoint. There are people who are born androgynous, but these are statistical oddities. It's very rare statistic. Here I'm not talking about gender as a social construct. I'm talking about sexual differences, biological sexual differences. Every singular human is either a male or a female. He's either a European or an Asian or an African or even a mixed race person. The particularity of mixed race person is still a particularity. It's a continuum, but yeah. Then every person belongs to a given generation Then the generation is a continuum, born officially in the 1940s, in the 1970s, in the 2010s, etc., etc. Then if you are born in 1982, 1985, 1989, officially, you belong to the generation born in the 1980s, and you share a particularity with all the people who are born in the same generation. Then you can divide, depending then generation, is it strictly chronological, is it cultural, these are other questions. Yeah. Then there are psychological particularities. There are people here, I just take example, introversion, people who are introverts, or extroverts, people who are psychotic, neurotics, narcissistic, here these are negative type, but each person has particular psychological dispositions or talent, that's another determination. Each person has a talent, even people with low talent, and there are various types of talent, people who are good at expressing themselves with their body, sportsmen, dancers, etc. People who are good at expressing themselves with language, people who are good at understanding and communicating with others, etc. There are various particular types of talents, and each individual inherits a talent. Yeah, these are examples. And then another example, in the realm of economy, each singular individual is an economic agent, that would be the universal, and the particular would be the various activities, and even, let's say, farmers, industry, factory workers, and working in the services. These are the classical divisions. But even someone who is a beggar, or who is homeless, or who is retired, or a baby, they are not economic agents in the sense that they do not officially produce wealth. They are not employed in the modern economy, but they are nonetheless economic agents in the sense that they consume products. Sometimes they produce value. There are retired people who work for free. There are unemployed people who work on the black market, or who give, etc., free work in various non-official modes, etc. So every singular human is determined economically, etc., etc. The particular determinations are not random. I will show them, but it's just to explain. And in a more philosophical sense, the universal is that which we call God in the real sense, if one wishes. Namely, God is the truth, in the sense that the truth is universal. It's valid for every human. That's why there's only one truth, because the truth is the same for every singular individual, but it has to be mediated through the particularities. And the example, very simple, is if I say 2 + 2 = 4, this truth is universal. I am a singular individual with my particularities. My singular self is Luca. I have various particularities. White male, officially 30 years old, French citizen, but on a German region. I have many other particularities, but if I say 2 + 2 = 4, this is universally true for everyone. But then it's a very basic truth. There are much more complex truths, namely economic truths. They're also valid for everyone. Sociological truth, anthropological truth, etc. That's why science, in the noble sense, is that which is supposed to unite, because people are supposed to agree on scientific truth. But there are many debates within scholars, scientists, researchers, etc., etc. There are falsification of sciences sometimes, most of the times in the Western world. But a scientific truth is supposed to be the same for everyone. Let us take the question of IQ. If someone makes studies and research on IQ, whatever his particular determinations, whether he's white, black, Asian, male, female, young, old, rich, poor, etc., etc., he's supposed to find the same trends. The samples are not the same, so they are different, but everyone is supposed to stumble upon the same truth, because that's the very definition of truth. That which you stumble upon, and that's what unites humans. The particulars are the moments where humans are united within their own particularity, but also opposed to others. A very simple example of the ambiguity of the particular: men. All men, they share in common their masculinity. They tend to gather together or to do masculine things, but also, and the other particular would be women. and there are conflicts between the sexes, but also there is attraction. And within the same particularity, people, they are closer because they share the same particularity, but they are also further away because they are in competition with one another. Males usually struggle against one another to get females. That's how it works. But another example in economics, hairdressers, they all share the same particular job, so they are closer together because they live in the same working conditions broadly, but they are also in competition with one another because each has to provide better services to its clients to attract more clients, etc. The lawyers, that's the same. The lawyers, they all share the same, broadly the same training, that's their common particularity, but they are all in competition with one another to attract the best clients, etc. That's the ambiguity of the particular. It's both unity and opposition. And the singular is what is specific. Specific is another word for particular, but what is specific to the individual, in this sense, every singular individual is alone with himself, and every singular, in this sense, is unique, and the moment of unity is that which excludes. That's the moment of negativity, the realm of selfishness, egotistic desires, etc. This is the moment of singularity, and the singulars, they elevate themselves to the universal through the mediation of the particular. That's how people become good and virtuous. I simplify. Yeah, so that's a broad presentation. Okay, it's been 20 minutes, but I will keep commenting because what I have understood recently is that I have believed myself to be what I call the negative, which is evil, which is what the religions call variously the devil, Satan, Lucifer, or whatever name humans give to the figure of evil, as a singular individual. And good as a universal, because the universal would be God, and the singular would be the opposite of God, which is evil. It's a little bit more complicated than that, because first it means that I am divided against myself if I think like this, because I have a mind which, when I express truths, is universal, and these truths are valid for everyone. But when I am just me as a selfish individual, I am just retreating in my own singular self, and in this sense I am evil. But it's more simple than just good versus evil, because there are good tendencies within the singular, and there can be negativity within the universal, because the process of self-limitation, of particularization, is precisely setting limits, which is a negation. Here it's a little bit too complex, but basically what I have understood kind of recently is that the reason why I have consistently failed to communicate, although I talk about God as I envision this, as the universal, I talk about logic, about science, about spirit, I talk about what is universal. I have failed to gather any amount of quantitative success, because I have had a tendency to leave aside completely, almost, my singular self, with my limitations, my flaws, one might say, and talking ordinarily, without planning, without preparation, or without too much preparation, is partly to let my singular self express itself. But I have a spontaneous tendency to try to reach the universal, namely to be what I consider ordered, rigorous, etc., etc. But what I've understood recently is that the universal cannot exist without its particularization and without its singularization. And existence here is not randomly chosen, because precisely, I will talk about logic later, the relationship between the universal and the particular is what in the realm of essence we call the Grund und Existenz, the foundation and the existence. That which exists come out of its ground, of its Grund in German. So things exist because they are separated while being united nonetheless with their ground. And in this logical language, it means that the particular is a limitation of the universal. The universal particularizes itself, and the particular singularizes itself. And that's why the universal and the particular are inherent in the singular. That's why God lives in each man, but in order to reach the level of consciousness, what one has to elevate one's thought, to think properly, to think rigorously, to think holistically, etc., etc. And what I've understood recently is that the vision that my singular self is completely negative is not completely true, because this is what enables, here I will be a little bit philosophical, the singular is that which enables to reflect upon the particular and the universal. It's an individual which can think about its own particularities and the universality. So it's a moment in the process of elevation. Here I will use religious languages. The fall could be envisioned as the universal falling into singularity, and elevation towards God would be the singular who elevates towards the universal. That's very simplified. It's not to be taken too literally. That's just to illustrate. So what I've understood is that over the past few weeks, I have taken care of my singular self. It doesn't mean doing bodybuilding, putting makeup, nice perfume, etc. No, to take care of my singular self means to act responsibly, in a responsible way, as a singular individual. First, I will talk about ethics later, but simply to be responsible, because to universalize one's behavior, that's the transition towards ethics that I intend to talk about. What I've been thinking about recently over the past 2 weeks is, what if everyone acted like me? Me, myself, as a singular individual, what I have the awareness of being as just me, with my personal history, my personal memory, my personal body, my personal presence in the world. I've asked myself, the fundamental of ethics basically is to say, act according to a universal law. What if every singular acted like I do on a universal level? How would the world be? That's a very simplified view of Kantian ethics, universalist ethics. And I have acted in my singular life, and here I will just explain, through our singularity. Through my singularity, I live within time and space. I am limited in time and space, and my reality as a singular individual is limited to my senses. Here I'm looking at the room in which I live. I see 3 meters in front of me. I do not see behind me, although I do because I look at the camera. But I can hear sounds depending on their intensity coming from around me, but it's very limited. The temperature affects my body, the smell, the taste, etc., the vision. So I am limited in my, even if I go outside, I am limited in time and space, but with my singularity. But through my universal, I don't need to be physically present anywhere to think. Namely, if I think, I can open a book. If I think about the solar system, I can think about the sun, the moon, the planets, the galaxies, the cluster of galaxies. If I think rigorously, I can understand the determinations and how these celestial bodies move. If I think about economics, there is only one world economy, because everything is interconnected. If I read the news, I can learn about the spiritual life of every country or any country on the planet, and I don't need to be physically present in other geographical location to understand, because information made accessible through written word or spoken word on the internet or in newspapers or in books is universal. That's why I can be bipolar or schizophrenic in a way. That's philosophical schizophrenia, because through my mind, here we take an example. When I read this book, my mind is present in 1980s and 1990s American society. This is a particular book which talks about the sociology of the United States in the 1980s mostly, and the early 1990s. So it's a singular book about a particular era, but the ideas which are contained, they are universal, because if one leaves aside the particular determinations of American society, the singular statistics which are present in the book, and one extracts the universal, namely ideas about how democratic societies are structured depending on intelligence, it's universally valid because in every society, usually the most intelligent rise to the top when the rules of the game are open, namely when people are not constrained by discrimination based on any type of discrimination. It can be political, religious, ethnic, gender, etc., etc. When there are no restrictions and when society is functioning, the most intelligent rise to the top. This is a universal human determination. It can be more or less quantitatively important depending on the level of what we would call meritocracy, namely in an open, in a sense, not open borders, open in a sense that open to competence, when there is no restriction to rise in the social ladder depending on competence, the most competent tend overwhelmingly to rise to the top. An American society, as this book demonstrates, has realized the meritocratic ideal as no other society had ever done, namely the most intelligent have had the tendency to rise to the top in American society. Then there can be problems because once they are on the top, they try to restrict sometimes the access to others through manipulation, etc., etc. But what this book tells is that the US has succeeded in the second half of the 20th century, officially, as succeeded at promoting a meritocratic society, an ideal society from the standards of fairness and justice as it is being envisioned in a universalist way. Yeah. So now that's the transition to the presentation of books. Okay, it's been 31 minutes. So, I will here just show the books that I have been reading. I cannot read all the books all day because precisely I work all day, but these are the kind of books that I've been reading. Try to keep in mind UPS. I am working on a revolution of the educational system, which is already occurring because the totality of world knowledge is being made available on the internet. What is lacking is a structure. And that's what I'm attempting, and that's what I have already provided and that I will keep providing, namely a structure for the totality of knowledge, and that is the school revolution. Yeah. So these are books about the American educational system by Ron Paul. Here's Ron Paul and John Taylor Gatto. Here's by Charles Murray, which explains simply that children and students, they are diverse cognitively. They are not all equal cognitively. So there has to be a realistic educational system, has to take into account that there is not the same potential. Yeah. So these are three singular books about a particular type of society or a particular subject, depending what particularity is chosen, namely the American educational system. But this is universal because here these are books about the French educational system, and they are broadly the same problem. It's formulated differently because the Americans are much more rigorous, much more serious, much more competent in denouncing the flaws of their educational system than the French. But these books, I haven't books from Germany or England or Scotland or Norway or Australia, but I know actually without, here it's the deduction, I don't need empirical validation, I know that there are books like these because it's a universal problem, and here universal means the Western world. There are reasons which explain this, but basically it's a universal problem, and each particular Western country suffers from this problem. So yeah, but the Americans, they are the best at identifying the problem and solving the problem, also because they are the best at promoting homeschooling, but they are the best at identifying the problem. Then, other books. Bullshit Jobs by Graeber, The Bureaucracy and Bullshit Jobs. Graeber is anarcho-communist, Mises is right-wing libertarian, and this book is, the book by Graeber, has been translated into French, and it has been translated into many other languages. Then again, I don't need empirical validation because this is simply how the market works. When a good book, which is politically correct while being politically incorrect nonetheless, is published, it's being translated in many languages. So here, the problem of bullshit jobs is universal, and that's why the book has had success in many countries, many particular countries. And yeah, that's a fundamental problem, namely, it's in the very structure of modern society. There are an enormous amount of people who waste their day working stupid jobs which are economically parasitical. Yeah. Then, books, intelligent American books, about the decline of white America. This book, only the Americans are capable of writing such good books that I haven't read thoroughly, but I will devote my time to reading this book more thoroughly if I have to, if I have the opportunity, but I know broadly what it says. It could be written in every other Western country, but only the Americans have the freedom of mind, the intelligence, the competence, and the ability to actually talk intelligently about problems. How to rebuild liberty, again, Charles Murray. That's a solution to the bullshit jobs, to the educational system, to the coming apart, etc., etc., to the welfare state. Then again, I have only this book about the welfare state in my library, but I don't need 5 books about the welfare state, because to be intelligent means to extract the particular and the universal out of the singular. This is, they are mostly American statistics, example, etc. But if one is intelligent, one can extract the particularities and the universality and then deduce to the welfare state of all other countries. Australia, New Zealand, England, Germany, France, Belgium, there are welfare states in most Western countries, in a lot of countries, but mostly Western countries, and the determinations are the same everywhere. That's why information is made available in real time through the internet. Anyone who wishes to abolish the welfare state in his or her own country can draw inspiration from this book. And the country where I find myself in a singular level, it's officially France, actually it's Germany. Don't say that to the French, they might not enjoy this. That's a joke, that's a joke. Yeah, if I want to improve the country where I find myself empirically on a singular level, I can draw inspiration from this. And this is what I have been doing, because I've understood that the reason why no one cares about what I say is because I have to act myself on a singular level. Otherwise, others, they don't care. So that's what I do. Then, books about prepping. Again, this is American, what I call American common sense, to store water, to store supplies, medicine, tools, hygiene, food, etc., etc., and the pantry primer. I have been promoting these books for many weeks, many months probably, but I've understood that people, I receive no interest, no comments, no views, no likes, nothing, because I don't apply myself what I promote. So I have acted upon the past few weeks. I have started to follow the pieces of advice that I give to others, and I have made supplies to be able to share with the people around me, my neighbors, on a physical level. Then, a book that I've been reading, these are 5 wounds which prevents oneself from being oneself. It's about psychological wounds which hurts the soul and the psyche. Yeah, this is from a French author, but it's a good book, but the psychological determination of the soul, they are the same for everyone. And again, that's universal, particular, singular. Then, these books, here they are singular books of a particular context, a French context. This is a French communism, a modern view of communism. It's kind of anarcho-communism. That's a book that I bought many years ago. I've read parts of it. So my intention is partly to import libertarianism in France, because I speak French, but also to import communism in America, not the Stalinist type, but the intelligent type. Maybe that's I'm not sure, but that may be the proper solution, because historically France has been a communist country, at least since 1945, and even in the 19th century it was not communist, it was a proto-socialist. and the United States have been historically a libertarian country, one might say. Yeah, but an exchange of ideas, a communist revolution in America and a libertarian revolution in France. That's a challenge. No, that's a joke. No, but seriously, to build autonomy, to reacquire work, commerce, business, rurality, etc. These are examples that I've taken from my library of what I call, here I'm not sure it's always intelligent, but this is intelligent anarcho-leftism, namely autonomy. That's the equivalent of right-wing intelligent autonomy. It's not political here, it's just autonomy. Here it's a little bit more political, but the ideas are the same. And what I'm explaining is that I am illustrating the travel of ideas. This kind of book is kind of universal, but this kind of book, it's really France, not always in the good side, but the good aspect of the bad aspect of France, namely the good aspect of communism in France. Yeah. And finally, the books that I've been reading more seriously. Here it's another illustration. Here we have a German author, Mr. Hans Hermann Hoppe, with an American mindset influenced by Jewish authors. His mentor is Murray Rothbard and also partly Mises. So a German who went to the US empirically to gather ideas from Jews and to share them with the world on various books and websites, etc. And here it has been translated in French. That's just to illustrate that ideas can be universalized. And yeah, this is what I've been reading. Here, Spontaneous Order by Chase Rachel. I have had this book, I've promoted this book for a long time, and I've read the beginning of the book. It's excellent, really. Intellectually, that's excellent. I was surprised by the level of intelligence and the rigor, and it's really an excellent book. I don't know what else to say. I haven't read everything yet completely, but the part that I've read, everything is rigorously defined, it's structured, it's ordered. That's great. Another example of a book by Hoppe, Hans Hermann Hoppe, translated in French. This kind of book in France, they have a very, very low success because it's so alien intellectually. Here's And the Fed by Mr. Ron Paul. And again, to illustrate that we live in an age where the problems of the Federal Reserve, as very well analyzed by Ron Paul, they are made accessible to everyone. The problems of the Fed, they are universal because the Federal Reserve controls indirectly most central banks in the world. So by studying this singular book, which talks about the particular problems of central banks in the US, which is a universal topic, the study of money, banking, economics, it's knowledge, intelligent knowledge in an accessible way. There is a great bibliography, beginning, intermediate, advanced, etc., etc. This is how information is being shared. And then this book, I've talked about this in a recent video, it's excellent as well, but it's excellent mediocrity. It's not derogatory, it's simply that it's an average book, but average in the realm of excellence. It's excellence, average excellence, one might say. But it's a very good book, which the reason why I'm explaining is that we live in an age where the intellectual battle, in a way, in the realm of economics, has been won. The libertarians, they're aware of this, but the problem with the libertarians, the Mises Institute, is that they make a few thousands of views on their videos. But the intellectual battle has been won by the libertarians because they have uncovered the economic truth. It's not the truth because truth in economics is very complex, it's a process, it's an unfolding, there are interactions between the leftist view, the right-wing view, but broadly, the view of Mises, he got right about a lot of things in terms of economic efficiency. So anyone on this planet who wishes to improve the economic conditions of his country, he can read this book first. In Africa, if you live in Africa, South America, Asia, Europe, America, wherever, you want to improve the economic condition of your country, you can read this book. That's not what I intend to do, but to understand the problem, it's a very good read. Yeah. And finally, another example, we live in an age of the sharing of information. A book like this, it's very accessible. Timeline of everything. Anyone with an internet connection can access this book, either buying the book, which is in English. It costs it's 20 pounds. It's expensive, it requires time, and that's very accessible in the sense that it's not a theoretical book, it's not very complex. But what I want to illustrate is that we live in an age where the totality of world knowledge is made available in real time. And people are not aware of this because they spend their time working bullshit jobs. Yeah, that's an illustration. Yeah, okay. So, it's been 45 minutes, probably. I will make a short pause, and then I will comment my own documents. Yeah, if people have taken the time 45 minutes to listen to what I've been saying, they can stay here for many more dozens of minutes, because I'm about to say interesting things, and here it's a I said I talk to everyone, potentially yes, but actually I talk consciously maybe to my followers, the 1 or 2 persons who have shown a consistent interest in my content, because here I will introduce my worldview in an as simplified way as possible, which is the view of the totality, which is God in a way. I try not to talk too much, I try not to use the word God too much, too often, because there are misunderstandings, but it's the result of months and years of intellectual work. It's not the definitive version precisely because my work consists in simplifying as much as I can to make as simple as possible without compromising and sacrificing on a minimum of intellectual rigor. So it's not like, I've worked to make a super a super system. It's very simplified. It's very simplified. Willingly have downgraded, lowered down the level, but it's the best compromise that I have found at this moment in time. It will improve as long as I can work harder, better, faster, stronger, as Kaini would say. But here's the best compromise in terms of simplicity, accessibility, intelligibility, but also requirements in the sense that it requires to focus for those who are not used to thinking, either for lack of training, lack of education, lack of intelligence, lack of will, it depends. But but now I will drink a glass of water that I will appreciate. That's a piece of advice that I can give. Try to appreciate every glass of water that you can drink. So I will go get a glass of water. Here I will speak ordinarily for a few minutes. I experience violent mood shifts. I've been saying this for many months in many of my videos. I experience violent mood shifts. Here I know that I have been stable. There's a reason why I suffer from violent mood shifts, because I think about the world as being my reflection, and there's violence in the world, and also because the reason why I've suffered violent mood shifts recently is because the last video that I posted, after almost 10 days of non-communication while working on myself and improving myself, etc., I posted very long videos, which was the result of my maturity, my process of growing up, etc., etc. And there are 21 people who watched the video. At least 3 or 4 of them, they are probably me watching my own videos. and there's one person who put a like. I'm not seeking likes, as many likes as possible, but simply when I share the result of, it's not days, it's actually, because each video that I post is the result of an entire intellectual life of development. So that's why when I can focus a minimum, they are really better and better in terms of intellect, wisdom, and simplicity, the balance of intellectual complexity and accessibility through simplified communication. I'm not trying to make very good videos in terms of theoretical, structured way. If I wanted to, I have tried sometimes, but it's counterproductive because people do not understand. I waste time, and I try to find the proper balance between accessibility and rigor. And I have had a violent mental crisis, one might say, because the more I lower down, here I express this calmly, the more I lower down my standards in terms of intellect, by trying to be, I sacrifice everything that I had considered good in terms of intellectual seriousness for the sake of trying to communicate. And I receive almost, there's one person who commented my video. I thank you, my commentator, thank you for your advice. I really do, it's really helpful, really. But I receive almost no reaction. And when this happens, I have philosophical crisis. I doubt the existence of the existence of not of God, but the existence of others, because I'm in an autistic relation with myself. I talk in front of a camera, I publish videos on the internet, and I'm usually the only person, one of the only person who watches my own videos. So it's a autistic relation, and it kind of drives me insane. But here I can express myself more calmly. So yeah. So my job has consisted mostly, one might say, at extracting ideas and communicating them in a calm, stable, peaceful way after experiencing violent modes of insanity. When I'm alone in my apartment, sometimes I become completely insane, but there are reasons. It's not a random psychiatric disorder, it's because there are reasons, a failure to communicate, existential crisis, anxiety, etc., etc. So here I express calmly, because I have slept well, I have spent time outside talking to people, which strengthens my worldview in a good sense. I incorporate more understanding in my conceptual worldview, etc. But yeah, I have this tendency, when I put an enormous amount of effort, which here it's effort means counter effort, namely effort for me consists in sacrificing all forms of intellectual seriousness, no editing, no planning, no order, or very few, no systematic comment. I just speak randomly because I know that this is the only way that I can communicate with others who might remotely understand what I'm talking about. When I do this, when I sacrifice what I think is serious, and when I fail to communicate, I experience ontological despair in a way. But yeah, so I've tried to keep that for myself as long as I can, or to work on myself. I've watched a video today, bad mood is like bad breath, don't share it with others. I simplified that. That was in a discussion with Peterson and other Americans. Mr. Prager, Dennis Prager, I think he says so. Yeah, that's a good way of formulating this. So I try not to share my bad moods, I keep them for myself, but eventually I am partly moody, in the sense that I have outbursts of, yeah. But enough talking about, yeah. No. I will talk about ethics. I will put the structure on the video is posted to illustrate what have I been doing on a singular level. Do we see? Okay. I will just take a couple of minutes to organize. I will put down the books and make room for documents. Do we see? Okay, it's not very clear. Do we see? Okay, I will get it closer. Okay, this is very simplified, it's not very serious, but this is what I've been doing on a singular level, how I structure my day, how I've been structuring my day over the past at least couple of weeks, consciously. It's not in a strictly speaking chronological order, but that's the broad view. I try to structure my mind by studying logic. A little bit each day, I study logic to think properly, to strengthen my mind. I study logic because logic is the science of thought, thought determination. It helps understand oneself as a mind, the transcendental ego, as Kant would say. The categories of Kant, they are not very rigorous. So I study logic to strengthen my mind and to think properly. This is what I've been talking about with UPS, but here it's very basic, but I will talk later about, Then my soul. Every day, usually in the morning, I study, this is what I call introspection, I study psychology, psychiatry, psychoanalysis, not the three at the same moment sometimes, but I have been doing this mostly in watching the channel Psych2Go, but also reading books, or simply meditating about myself, because to understand oneself psychologically, psychiatrically, in terms of psychiatric determination and psychoanalytically, it's a tremendous help and relief, because when I understand my problems, every human has problems to a certain extent. Some people, they have succeeded in solving their problems more than others. I know that I suffer from psychological, psychiatric, psychoanalytical problems. And the more I understand by studying theoretically, or by looking inward, by meditating and combining the two eventually, the more I can identify the problems and try to solve them. So the channel Psych2Go, it's really excellent, and it has helped me a lot. And psychological problems can be very high intelligence. I did this a few weeks ago. When I understood that I share the particularity with other very intelligent people, the particularity of very high intelligence, and it has caused me a lot of suffering, a lot of misunderstanding because of a very high intelligence. It has appeased me, and I have really, as a singular individual, I have characteristics which are particular to people with a very high intelligence. So in this sense, I cannot be completely like others just for the sake of for the determination of intelligence. In a sense, I feel a lot more connected to introvert, highly intelligent people, kind of autistic, because I live in my own intellectual world like they do, and I suffer from the problems that they suffer from. And that's why going out and talking to people has helped me a lot, because I am in contact with people who are very different from me, just on a cognitive level. That's not derogatory. It's not a judgment of saying they are less intelligent. They are sometimes, most of the times, more competent in their field than I could ever be. Not always, but yeah. But talking with ordinary people here, in terms of IQ, the region where I find myself, the average IQ is probably around 100 for the European population. So an average IQ of 100, I have an IQ of 130 broadly. I have 2 standards deviation above the average, so in a sense I'm very intelligent in comparison with people with an IQ, a median IQ of 100, who are already more intelligent than most human beings on this planet. It's not a negative judgment in the sense of good and bad, it's just judgment in the sense of understanding. Yeah, so it has helped me a lot, and I do this every day. I dedicate a few dozens of minutes, sometimes a few hours, to studying my soul. Then the household. Here it's usually in the morning. I clean my room. That's trying to exteriorize the mind and the soul. The mind ordered by logic, the soul cured by study of psychology and introspection. I try to exteriorize the inner order in my immediate environment by cleaning my room. The outside, the immediate outside, is a reflection, like a mirror, of the inside. It takes will and intelligence to clean. Here, clean means to order. It's not just a cleaning lady, it's ordering. The immediate environment, it includes minimalism, namely I also get rid. I've been doing this consistently over the past few months, but with more intensity over the past couple of weeks. I've become a minimalist, namely I really lower down my level of comfort and I get rid of a lot of objects, so I really live a minimalistic lifestyle. I sleep on the ground, I eat raw vegetables, raw fruits, bread, a little bit of oil and salt, but I do not eat anything else. So I really lowered. I have gotten rid of many clothes, many objects. I almost don't buy any object, or very very few objects. So I have become really a radical minimalist for the sake of ecology, communism, libertarianism as well, and German nationalism as well. Yeah. I buy supplies every day. I go out for at least 2 hours and I buy supplies to be able to share them with people around me, just to be responsible. To be responsible, that's partly the American mindset, is to be responsible. To be responsible for the others, one has to be able to be responsible for oneself. And in case of economic inflation, economic problems, to be able to have supplies, it's common sense to have plan ahead. But I will not go out and take for thousands of dollars. I can't carry this, but I take a few supplies every day: food, drugs, medical drugs, hygiene, etc., etc. For others, and eventually for myself, if I have to, but that I'm willing to share with others. That's my communist self, etc., etc. Then the neighbors, the people who live around me, in my immediate environment, I have tried to cooperate and to make gifts, not for hypocritical reasons. I've told them, to those that I've made gifts, I have given them supplies, but simply to say, it's in my best interest that you take care of yourself in terms of responsibility, making supply, eating healthy food, buying local product. It's in my best interest on a singular level that my immediate geographical environment be as responsible and autonomous as possible. It's common self-interest. It's not oh, I will be good, etc. No, it's if you take care of yourself, I will not have to take care of myself, because you will be autonomous. That's in my best interest. Then we see, yeah. so here the order is partly chronological. That's how I structure my day. I work every day from broadly 6 a.m. until 22 p.m. or midnight, or even 1 a.m. In the morning, depending when I get up, etc. But I work all day, but it includes moments of rest and meditation. In a sense, when I do not work, I think, or watching videos is part of my work, in a sense that it's partly entertaining, one might say, but I incorporate this in my worldview, so it's not useless. I use this to think thoroughly about the world. So yeah, so it's partly chronological and partly geographical. Then there is village, town, city. I live in a small town. I clean the streets when I go out. On a singular level, I pick up the trash, the cigarette butts, the trash, the cans, etc. Why do I do this? Not because I'm good, but simply because if everyone acted on a singular level and picked up the trash in his immediate urban environment, the streets would be clean, and the counterpart is, first I can do a little bit of virtue signaling, but also I do this 1 hour, let us say, each day. I clean a lot, which the rest of the day, when I study books like these, it helps me understand on a universal level. Here, the universal means society at large. It helped me understand why there are so many trash in modern society. The socialist organization plus the cognitive distribution, it helps understand. So I do both. That's why I try to harmonize my lifestyle. At least 1 hour, sometimes 1 hour and 30 minutes, I clean the streets. I don't do just this, but on my way out to buying supplies and encountering people, I clean wherever I walk. It's difficult for me because I'm partly disabled, so it's physically painful, but I don't complain. That's my will. But I clean the streets, and the rest of the day, I partly study great American books about socialism and the cognitive structure of a society. Namely, I understand why the streets of most Western countries are filled with trash, because there are systemic problems. I have both aspects. I do my part on a singular level, but the counterpart is not, oh, I do this because I am good, etc. No. The counterpart is I study seriously and I see the broad picture, that which I will talk about later. Yeah. I favor local businesses for buying my supplies, because if everyone acted like I do, if every singular individual favored, it's not exclusive, it's quantitative proportion. It's mostly buying local, organic, crafts-made product. It would stimulate local businesses, independent businesses. People would be encouraged to start their own self-made business. The great distribution companies would lower down their profit. They would lose power over individuals. The lobbies, the political parties in league with the lobbies, etc. I will talk about this later. But if everyone favored the local businesses, people and communities would be more independent, more autonomous, etc. That's a universal ethical law which can be universalized without contradiction. If people favored what is around them, if everyone acted like this, there would be global harmony for everyone. I distribute food stamps, sometimes randomly to the people who need it most. It stimulates local business. I do not distribute money, I distribute food stamps, so that the state doesn't have to do this. So I'm trying to replace the state on a singular level. But if everyone acted like this, if those who have the financial means to share, not their money but food stamps, the welfare state would vanish. That's one way of... if everyone cleaned the streets when he or she walks in the street, the people who are hired by the state to clean the streets and who do not do the work properly, not because they are incompetent, but because of the inherent structure of socialism, people in a socialist economy are structurally incompetent for inherent reason. It's not their individual fault, it's the fault of the system. Yeah. So if everyone did this, the streets would be clean. There would be no bullshit job of cleaning the streets. If everyone did this, a lot of intermediary businesses would vanish, and growth on a local, healthy growth would be stimulated on a local level. If everyone distributed food stamps, all those who have the financial means, the welfare state would vanish with all the bureaucrats, with all the taxes, with all the inefficiencies, etc., etc., and there would be more humane interaction on a good sense. People would be more willing to trust one another. Those who do not deserve food stamps, they would not get food stamps, whereas in a socialist welfare state, everyone gets food stamps or a donation, etc., whether or not he or she deserves this. In a community managed style, only the people who are deserving, the undeserving poor, as the Americans call this. I make public donations. I buy by giving away books. Here it's my communist self. I have too much books. I am willing to share publicly with random people. I mean, I do not give books randomly, but there are public boxes. I give my excesses of good things, namely books. If people who have excesses of good things share them, it would increase social cooperation, anonymous social cooperation. And if the rich, the privileged, share their goods not because they are compelled by the state but out of some sort of a moral imperative, this is the American tradition, before the welfare state, the society at large would be much better because people would be more intelligent, they would be more willing to trust one another, etc., etc. Then, about here again the American ethos. In order to function properly, one's own biological family, one has to encourage communication. It's not always easy, but yeah, the spiritual family, the biological family is the biological family in which one grew up with and with ties of blood, one might say, and the spiritual family is the family that one chooses, the family that one acquires by leaving one's own family and finding a wife and starting one's own family. That's marriage, basically. So I try to favor communication. It's difficult because there are various modes of consciousness, etc., etc. Then I do on a broader level, the level of country. I follow the news and I try to communicate. Or I follow the news. It can be websites, journal. I do not buy paper journals because it's a waste in terms of recycling, etc., in terms of the garbage that it produces, so I read on the internet, but the news of every country are available in real time. I read mostly France, the US, sometimes England, but by the videos that I watch, I follow the news of Canada through Peterson or others, and we live in an age where the borders of countries are becoming irrelevant because precisely information is circulating in real time. That's what I've been talking about. But I read mostly in English and in French because these are the two languages that I master the most. So yeah, and the American newspapers, they talk about the whole world, and the French as well, the English as well. Every newspaper here, every website of every news media talks about the whole world through his own particular perspective. Then about civilization, I follow the news mostly of Western website, but the same. Here everything is blurred in a sense that information travels universally. Anyone can speak about any country in an intelligent way. Then the world, that's the same. I do the same. And finally philosophy. I read books and I watch videos to try to think about the totality in a systematic way. So that's what I do most of my days. That's how my days are structured. I begin with the soul and the mind, which is my singular self, but the mind is universal. The soul, each individual has an individual soul, but the determinations are universal as well. They do not suffer, not all humans suffer from the same psychological, psychiatric, or psychoanalytical problems because it's particularized, but the problems and the solutions are universal, and the laws of logic as well. So here it's the transition from the singular, that's a small circle, a larger circle geographically, one might say, but eventually I try to think about the totality, to incorporate all the levels, and the more I do this, the more I feel balanced and kind of at peace with myself, and the more I am at peace within, which is, it requires a struggle to find intellectual, psychological, geographical peace. It requires a constant struggle. Yeah, but I have tried recently to consciously incorporate all levels of my existence, singular, particular, universal. It's difficult, yeah, but that's what I could say. So that's what I have been doing. That's how I organize my days daily. I do this daily, and I do this more and more systematically, thoroughly, with more intensity, more competence, because I grow more competent, more order, more structure, etc. But then there are events, it's not strictly planned in the sense that I can go out and encounter people, talk for a few dozens of minutes, but a few minutes with people. Sometimes I go out twice or 3 times depending on the circumstances. Sometimes I dedicate myself to reading one type of book or producing a video like this. It takes me a few hours, etc., etc. So it's not rigorously, it's not formally extremely rigorous in a sense. I'm not Kant, who had a very structured schedule, but it's the broad idea, and I believe that everyone should do this to study the universal of the intellect, the singular of the soul, to order one's own immediate environment. And the more people do this, the more they will be at peace with themselves, with their immediate environment. And if most people do this, peace will spread in a way. Yeah, that's what I think. But peace, to achieve peace, it requires a constant struggle. That's the unity of struggle and rest, in a way. Yeah. So here, what I've been doing for 1 hour and 16 minutes is the result of one entire day, but actually many days, many weeks, many months, many years of intellectual, ethical work. And my work consists in being able to share what I say sometimes good ideas in a more accessible way, but it requires focus and attention. And here it's not a completely spontaneous video in the sense that I have a pre-planned view, so I'm not talking like I used to do sometimes, and I'm not making a show like I do sometimes with singing or whatever. But it's it's kind of a vaguely serious video in a sense that I believe that it can be very useful, and I encourage people to do this. And in order to do this, they will say, oh, but we don't have the time. That's why I work all day, because the more I find peace and order within my mind, my soul, my immediate environment, the more free time I have to think about global problems. Here, that's the more I understand my singular self and solve some of the problems of my singular self, the more I can dedicate myself to the universal. Yeah, I've understood this recently, so I'm trying to overcome dualism in a sense that the singular is all negative, the universal is all good. Maybe the universal is all good, but my singular self, if it's all negative, one has to understand why, and I have to solve my own problems in a way. And I try to do this step by step, which of course is kind of problematic, but yeah. And here what I am doing with this video is to communicate universally the results, the fruits of days, weeks, months, years of intellectual and ethical labor, and to share this universally. Formally, it's not very pleasant, I guess, because I make no editing, etc. But I have decided to not to compromise in a sense that if people need colors, cartoons, jokes, sometimes I make jokes, but planned jokes, perfect editing to understand very simple ideas, I can understand why they prefer that, but my job in a way consists in sharing links towards the kind of videos which are perfectly well edited, formally, aesthetically pleasing, etc. The videos by Psych2Go, they are great on an aesthetic aspect, but here I just provide the formal structure, and I have prioritized the intellectual aspect. And here intellectual doesn't mean pure intellect, it means intelligent enough to make thoughts accessible. I've watched a video by I think it was Di Lorenzo or Jeff Deist or Robert Murphy on Mises Institute, who said that Murray Rothbard had a special talent for being both very intelligent and very accessible at the same time. I try to imitate this ideal, to mix, in a good sense, the intellectual standards with the accessibility. But I have to sacrifice the aesthetic aspect. Oh, because I am ugly. Hide your face, you are too ugly. The aesthetic aspect is okay, but it's your face that we don't want to see. That's a joke, that's a joke. At some moment, people will like me. I studied logic, I understand. There's some people. Yeah, I'm not completely despicable. Not always, at least. So now I will take another glass of water that I will appreciate, because part of my ethics consists in appreciating every glass of clear water that I can drink, because I don't know how long I will be able to drink clear water and to appreciate this. So I encourage people to appreciate glasses of water, because it's not everyone is in a position to appreciate, to have access to a glass of water and to appreciate this. So that's part of my ethics. Now, for the past few months, one might say, or past few weeks, I have enjoyed every glass of water. That's part of the minimalism. I do not drink alcohol, of course, and soft drinks with a lot of sugar. I drink mostly and almost only water, and I appreciate. Because I know that there are people in Ukraine with no running water, in Africa, in South America, in Asia, etc. And I try to think globally. I will not pretend that I care about everyone, because I don't, but I'm intelligent enough to understand that being able to have consistent access to clear running water is a privilege in a global view. And I try to appreciate my privilege as long as I can. That's not white privilege, because there are not only white people who have access to clear water, precisely because historically white people have developed infrastructures which have enabled a lot of people on this planet to have access to clear running water. Not everywhere, it's not perfect, it's not consistent, etc. But quantitatively it has been a tremendous progress. Yeah, I've learned this by studying good books. Yeah, so now, okay, 1 hour and 23 minutes. I will introduce my documents that I will comment. There are 4 table boards that I want to comment. As I say, this is my current worldview, and it's very simplified, but I will use them as a tool to illustrate my worldview. Okay, here a little bit of editing, not editing, a little bit of, how do you call this? Do we see? Yeah, so I will comment briefly. This is what I call the phenomenal appearance of spirit, the phenomenology of spirit. Here, let us use my documents. I have internet documents and I have what could scholarly documents. UPS, we see, yeah. Spirit is universal, that's the invisible substance that is shared by all humans who think. And here the presentation is the particular appearance of spirit, which is the mind of humans, basically, the particular context of the Western world and the singular country of the United States of America. That's where the inspiration comes from. But here would be the West, and all Western countries, they share the fundamental determinations in common. And here I define the word Western. West means, here it's in a historical perspective, as opposed to the USSR in a way, namely countries westward of Poland, without Japan. So I simplify, I define, these are countries which have been historically and still are predominantly populated by European people, and European countries anthropologically, which includes the US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. Here, European means in a quantitative proportions, determination of proportion, but also the historical role. It also includes South Africa. So when I say Western countries here, it means the countries of continental Europe westward of Poland and north of Italy and Spain. I'm not sure that in Italy and Spain they have like this. So these are northwestern countries, namely predominantly Germany, France, Belgium, the Netherlands, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, and Great Britain, predominantly. Plus then Canada, the US, Australia, South Africa, the white European spiritual life of South Africa, and New Zealand. This is what I mean by Western, but this is the particularity. The singular it's predominantly the case in the US because it's where the life of spirit is the most consistently, is the most developed, and the universal would be spirit in a sense that the knowledge which is being produced, the ideas which are being shared, they are universal, they are valid for everyone, but it's only in Western societies that the opposition, the conflicts, and the life of spirit is the most thriving. Yeah, so now I will comment. The symbol of the yin and yang, it is here to help illustrate the unity and the reciprocal determination of opposites. Do we see? Yeah, so I comment. Here I speak in English, which is a particular language. I can anticipate that the people who will watch this video in the few hours or days after its publication are, in a chronological perspective, are predominantly white, I guess, white males of native English language, probably Americans or English, etc., or of any other nationality, any other origin who speak English in the coming hours or days after the publication. But here it's, like I said, it's valid for every Western country and eventually for the world at large, and I will just explain the structure. The Democrats and the Republicans, this is the political divide in the US, in America. But I wrote liberals and conservatives. Here, Democrats and Republicans, it's a particular type of political opposition, but in every democracy there has to be only two parties because of polarity, and they have various names. Here I will use logical categories that I will talk about later. In a democracy, the divides are a continuum from left to right, but if it's divided in two, there are only two poles, the left and the right. The particular determinations of the left-right divide are different depending on the countries because of the historical history, the anthropological determination, the religion, the economic context, etc., etc. But if there is a left, there has to be a right. Left and right, that's the symbol of the yin and yang. Namely, the left, they have an aspect of right wing within them, and the right wing, they have an aspect of left wing. It can vary quantitatively, but that's just to illustrate. It's not just left versus right, it's both aspects. People with a political culture know that the left has right-wing tendencies, in the sense that I have the example in mind, but just let us take two examples. Robespierre, he was a far left activist in the context of the French Revolution, but he had what would be considered right-wing tendencies in the modern context. Adolf Hitler was a right-winger, but with left-wing tendencies. So it's very complex. These are examples. It can be applied for most historical figures. So yeah, Democrats versus Republicans. That's the American particularity, but in England that would be a Tory versus Whig. In France it's gauche et droite, which can take various forms. It can be the socialist versus in Germany that would be Die Linke versus CDU or SPD, CDU. Then there's a continuum, but the left and right divide is a universal polarity. So it's valid for every country, and in this sense, the names are important because Republicans, I know that there are Republicans in France, but Republicans in France means the entire political spectrum. Every official politician in France is a Républicain because the Republic is the entire political structure. And there is a party who is called Les Républicains, they are on the right, but in the context of the US, they would be kind of left-leaning Democrats. Economically, that's why the US, they are more sane in a way than most Western countries, because I have the perspective of France. What is considered right-wing and far-right in France in terms of economics would be middle of the democratic view, or even left-leaning democratic view. Marine Le Pen, in the context of America, she would be a left-wing Democrat. The far right in France is the left-wing Democrats in the US in terms of economics and even sometimes culture and ethnicity, etc. That's why there has to be a recategorization. That's why I explain here, someone like Charles Murray, in my view, he's in the center, he's a centrist in American politics. I know that empirically he's not, he's considered right-wing, but he ought to be in the center. But Charles Murray, in most countries which are not America, he would be considered a far-right extremist just because he talks about ethnicity and economic liberty. So that's why things have to be contextualized, empirically, historically, culturally, but also conceptually. Here it's just the conceptual presentation. So liberals versus conservative, that's a more broader trend. The conservatives really are on the right. Females versus males. So here I explain this first part, it's what is called subjektiver Geist, namely the determination of the souls. Republicans, conservatives, Democrat, liberal, this is politics, but males, females, etc., until anti-racism, racism, it's the determination of the soul. What structures the spiritual life of the West, I explain this document, is that there are opposition between females and males, men and women, which in the most radical or extremist forms is the opposition between feminists and miktos. The feminists bring about a reaction which is the miktos. The feminists are women who say we go our own way, we don't need men, we will replace men by a dependency on the state, and the men, they react negatively against the feminist attempt to emancipate, which is fake, because women are not emancipated from men, because they are married to the state, which is tied to politics. But the men who cannot find partners, they become incels, involuntary celibacy. So or they can become resentful and become miktos. So here it's a biological divide, here it's a cultural divide. Then in the realm of sociology and demography, usually on the left, in the modern context of the Western world, these are boomers, people who are born after the Second World War in the most prosperous, economically prosperous era mankind had ever experienced in the historical perspective, plus what I call stupid teenagers. These are usually leftist white teenagers who are filled with ideas about equality, tolerance, etc. These are stupid teenagers, and mostly immigrants. So this is the sociological, and then there are the liberals, what in France are called the bobo, which has a white leftist upper class. Here it's a very simplified view of the demography and the sociology of the left in modern Western countries. White boomers, white stupid teenagers, plus immigrants. The counterpart are old whites, they are also boomers demographically, but they are more conservative, with a rebellious white youth and westernized immigrants. In the middle, of course, there are the majority of the people, but these are tendencies, namely the stupid teenagers. These are left-wing white rebels, but they want to revolt against a system of which they are a manifestation. So a left-wing revolt in the context of the modern Western world doesn't make any sense, because the system is systematically revolting in the name of the left against all the traditional values. So they are revolting against revolution in a way. The real revolution, or the real revolt in the modern context, are rebellious white youth which want to restore order and tradition. And there are westernized immigrants. Here it's the sociology of the Republican Party in the US, but in most conservative parties in the Western world, namely old, rich white people, right-wing young people who believe in democracy, they are less and less, and westernized immigrants who want to stabilize the economic condition, the prosperity, etc., etc. That's very simplified. Then the question of race. Anti-racism usually is on the left. That's the dominant ideological trend in the Western world, namely anti-racism. Tolerance, equality, open borders, these are modes of anti-racism. And anti-racism is conceptually tied with racism, namely an anti-racist civilization where everyone talks constantly about race. Racism is to the 21st century what sex was to 19th century England. Namely, that's the taboo. No one talks about race while talking about race all the time, and it brings about logically a reaction. When everyone is anti-racist, people who do not find a place within society, they tend to dialectically respond, that's logically determined, and become racist. The truth is in the middle, namely race realism. This is balance, this is stability, namely to be able to talk intelligently about race. And when it is not possible because of legislation or morality, when people are prevented from talking rationally, peacefully, calmly, scientifically about race, science is universal, they become racist. This is what has happened to me on an empirical level, but this is the story of a lot of young white people, or not so young, who revolt against the system on the question of race, and they become racist not because they are evil, but because when an entire system is against you, you become the negative of the system, basically. That's the origin of racism, the revival of racism, and of course racism is wrong, but anti-racism is wrong as well. Anti-racism is wrong epistemologically, and it can be also morally with the excesses of virtue signaling, but racism is wrong morally, but there is a reason why it's switching towards the right. And the truth is race realism, which is in the middle. The left and the right. On the left there is virtue signaling, namely white people, white leftists. How they function is they signal their virtue by saying, oh, I am good, you are evil, you are racist, you are shameful, you are deplorable, you are repent, etc., etc. That's a revival of the religious aspect of, oh, you are shameful, repent, etc., etc. That's how white leftists function. They use this as a tool, they signal their own virtue, they advocate their own moral behavior in public, to shame others, to force them to retreat, and to win the arguments, and to win social status and dominance. On the right, what is sought, what people seek on the right, is not to signal their virtue, but to acquire recognition by their peers. So both are tied together, but the difference between signaling one's virtue and acquiring recognition is that in order to acquire recognition, one has to actually produce actions which are worthy of being recognized. So here it's just talk, and here it's the hope of being recognized for having achieved. Yeah, but actually the people who do virtue signaling, they are also seeking recognition. That's the unity of the opposite, namely they are seeking to be acknowledged by their professors, their scholars, by the journalists, by the politicians, by the people who have power. So they are the two connected. And the people who seek recognition, they also do virtue signaling by saying, I pay more taxes than you, I produce more economic wealth, I raise my children better, I denounce more stupidities by the media or the left, etc. There's also virtue signaling on the right wing, of course. That's what I've been doing with my ethics. I've signaled my virtue because that's a trick to to signal one's virtue. It's very efficient. That's the way. Hey, I pick up the trash. I give money. I work hard. I promote local business, and then people, they are seduced. Very easily seduced these white people. You just virtue signal. That's a way of exerting influence upon white people. You say, hey, I'm virtuous. I act for the benefit of the planet. I act for the benefit of the poor. And then the white people, they will say, oh, you are such a good person. That's why I can be a manipulator, because I understand the white psyche. That's how it works. So anyone who wants to manipulate white people, use this trick. That's how it works, basically. Because white people, they are programmed to obey morality and virtue. They are programmed to seek to be virtuous and moral. There are philosophical, anthropological reasons. Kevin MacDonald talks about this in the book Western Tradition and Individualism. Yeah. Then, in the realm of politics, on the left, they favor identity politics, which is tied with anti-racism, which is actually racism. So here, that's the racism within the anti-racism, because they favor identity politics instead of class struggle. That's the modern left. And on the right, it's more family, country, civilization. So here, it's the ethnic group, blacks, Hispanics, Muslims. Muslim is not necessarily an ethnic group, although predominantly is in the context of Western Europe, but this is the ethno-cultural or ethno-religious group which is favored, which is against the tradition of the left. So the left kind of negates its own tradition. And on the right, of course, it's family, country, civilization. This is what structures the mind of right-wingers in the modern Western world. That's why there is a revival of patriotism, because it is a reaction against identity politics. So here it's just a formal presentation of the life of spirit. People, there are more and more people who are becoming conservative, turning towards traditional family values and the defense of their civilization. These are people like Pat Buchanan, Douglas Murray. The conservatives, they favor these values. I just showed the formal structure. Then, in the realm of language, so here it's it was anthropology, phenomenology. Here it's psychology. That's structured. On the left, in the question of language, on the left, they are more favoring what is called newspeak, which is a distortion of language. People of color instead of black or Hispanics or etc. People of color, person with a physical disability instead of disabled person. Here I do not master the English language sufficiently enough, but in every Western country, whatever the language, German, French, English, Dutch, Norwegian, there are newspeak, like people of color or cultural enrichment, etc. This is newspeak, namely a distortion of reality through the modification of language. On the right, they have a tendency to use trash talking. An example, the N-word. Here it's specifically for the Anglo-Saxon world and mostly for the American world. The N-word, that's a way of trash talking. It's more on the right. And newspeak would be people of color. So a black person, that's ordinary language. The scientific language is Sub-Saharan African or Negroid. Negroid is not derogatory. That's the scientific jargon used by anthropologists to talk about black people. So that would be in the middle. That would be ordinary conversation. On the left, you would have people of color, and on the right, you would have the N-word. Yeah. The same goes with white people. Trash-talking white people, that's a hillbilly, rednecks. Here it's sociologically determined. Hillbilly, rednecks, whatever they use. Yeah. So that's the fundamental determination. That's why a lot of people who advocate free speech for the negative aspect, it's just they want to freely be able to trash talk others anonymously on the internet, but then not necessarily take full responsibility. So that's the problem with the right. But the newspeak here, that's political correctness. There are problems on both sides. That's why the best thing to do here is to be in the middle and to restore the intelligibility of language. But the left, they can do trash talking as well. The basket of deplorable, that's Mrs. Clinton trash talking the white working class by calling them deplorable. Yeah. That's why the Americans, at least they are not boring. they provide a universal entertainment. The debate between Trump and Clinton a few years ago, that was entertaining. It cannot be denied. At least they are not boring. About intelligence, there is a revival in the modern consciousness. It's not a revival, it's a discovery, a broadening, a widening of the knowledge about IQ. Namely, people who talk about IQ, they are mostly on the right. Namely, they share mostly this characteristic. And the knowledge about the intellectual determination of humans is becoming widespread through the medium of the internet. Namely, anyone who have an access to the internet can realize that there is a strong correlation between various social phenomena and intelligence. Where's the bell curve? This book, anyone with a knowledge of English and access to the internet and the ability to buy books, the money, the leisure, can buy and study this book. This is what I have done because I have promoted this book, but no one cares, so I care. That's my recent revolution, my intellectual revolution. I start to read the book that I promote. I had already vaguely read the book, but I will promote the ideas of this book because they are sane from an intellectual level. They are radical, but they are not extremist in the sense that they express the truth about society. But anyone, anywhere who wishes to understand his or her own society, wherever you live in America, Canada, Western Europe, Eastern Europe, Asia, Africa, Northern Africa, the Middle East, this book, if you have the possibility, you can read this book and it will help you understand your society, the flaws, the problems, the potentiality for improvement. That's why knowledge is being made universal. Yeah. And here, I will make a brief comment about racism. A book like this, which is very tempered, moderate, etc., to say that it's racist, it means that these are usually white people who say that, and sometimes Jewish people, but mostly white people who say that this is a racist book. But it means that, in the view of the white leftists, with this view, that non-whites are so stupid that they are not capable of understanding a good book, and that they might be frightened by the knowledge contained in this book, like they are like moral children who are not worthy of studying the modern advances of science. This is how white leftists function. But if you really respect, honestly, without hypocrisy, non-whites, you should say, but if you are non-white, you have as much a right as I have as a white person to study the recent advances of science and to think critically whether or not everything is true or everything is false. It's neither everything true nor everything false, but mostly it's very good. The statistics, they can be not accurate always, some logical argumentation can be dubious, but overall it's a great book, it's a breakthrough in science, and every intelligent person on this planet could read this book or ought to read this book and help the knowledge contained in this book to improve his or her society. If everyone did this, the world would be a much better place. But since no one is willing to do this, I will do this myself, and I will improve the German part of France where I reside. I will try to do so by translating, not literally, but sharing the ideas to make them intelligible in French, so that the people who are interested in improving might use the knowledge. No one is willing to do this, so I will do this myself. That's how I reason. Then, about education. On the left, they are in favor of inclusive education. On the right, they demand educational standards. But the problem is, if you include everyone without discrimination, without distinction, you include people who are not intelligent enough, not hardworking enough, not competent enough, etc., etc. And that's why there is a right-wing reaction. That's why most books, not all of them, but a lot of books who denounces the problems of the educational system, they come from the left for moral reasons, what I call intelligent leftists. These people who denounces the French educational system, they are former leftists, but they are socialist conservatives, or conservative socialists in a way. They come from the left, but they have switched towards the right as a reaction against the negative effects of left-wing policies. As far as I know, Mr. Taylor Gatto was a leftist, but here the categories are really broad. Charles Murray and Ron Paul, they are right-wingers in terms of economics and politics, but only in a world gone to the left. Ron Paul and Charles Murray, in a common sense, Europeanly populated society, namely the traditional American society, Ron Paul and Charles Murray, they ought to be in the center, where common sense is. So yeah, but then again, I express my ideas. Now it's been 1 hour and 50 minutes. The knowledge about the problems of the educational system in the US, but also in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, England, Ireland, Scotland, France, Germany, the Netherlands, Belgium, Norway, Sweden, and eventually also Spain, Italy, mostly Western countries, but eventually all the educational systems all over the world, this knowledge is made available in real time on the internet. So anyone who is vaguely interested in improving the educational system in his or her country or where he or she lives, he can use this knowledge to improve. Since no one is willing to do this, I will do this myself, but I am maybe intelligent enough to understand that because communication is global, if one improves one educational system, one improves all the educational systems. Because a good educational system would teach that knowledge is being made available for everyone on the internet. So if there is any person on this planet who is interested in making his or her children smart again, or to improve their intellectual capacity, he can use this book. That's what I'm intending to do. Yeah. Then control and free speech. Control is on the left, free speech is on the right. In the middle there would be controlled free speech, namely people ought to be free to express themselves, but with limitation, namely teenagers, immature people. Then it's a problem of politics, who ought to be allowed to express himself or herself. But for example, young women who post videos on the internet, the problem that they encounter is that this knowledge or this content is stored on the internet and sometimes against their conscious decision, and if they make embarrassing videos, it will remain on the web, available for everyone for the rest of their lives. That's why there are many women, mostly it's also the case for men, but it's more difficult for women to bear the responsibility because of the reputation. Reputation is more important for women because women who are excluded from society, they in a socio-biological perspective, they have a harder time to survive, whereas men, they are more independent. It's general, it's not always the case, but it's more difficult for a woman to be rejected than for a man, and therefore women, when they post pictures of them naked, or they say embarrassing things politically, or they make porn videos with their boyfriend, and then there's revenge porn, etc. The videos, they stay on the internet as long as there is technology. That's why if you make a mistake as a 15 or 17-year-old man or woman, but as a teenager you make a mistake, you post something stupid on the internet, you will be haunted by this for the rest of your life. And this is a new problem which emerges with the new generation, that many people, they only feel the consequences, but they do not understand the entire process, that knowledge shared on the internet is made available potentially for everyone. That's why there can be stalkers anywhere on the planet watching the videos. That's the problem of free speech. But the problem of control is the absence of free speech. But now we live in a society where there is too much control. People are not allowed to express themselves free, which prevents the progress of science and the progress of political liberty and the resistance against oppression. But that's why there are most people in the right-wing sphere who advocate free speech, like Mr. Elon Musk, because it's the zeitgeist, the spirit of the times. Yeah, but the problem with free speech, it brings about responsibility for all the stupid and immature things that people have said or done, and to be responsible is to accept one's own actions and their consequences, and it's very difficult. Then collectivism and individualism. The left, usually they are collectivist, and in the modern Western world there is economic collectivism through socialism, the welfare state. There is moral collectivism through virtue signaling, political correctness, etc., etc. That's why there is an individualist reaction. That's why there is a rise of libertarianism. People like Jeff Deist, Stephen Molyneux, Ron Paul, Charles Murray, they gain support, and the idea of individualism and liberty is rising slowly. It's still quantitatively insignificant, but mostly in the American sphere. the Mises Institute, people around Jeff Dice, they are gaining intellectual strength because it's a revolt against collectivism, because the opposites are united. When there's a switch too much on the left, here it's not the political left, here it's the conceptual left, there has to be a switch towards the right to restore the balance. That's how it works. Philosophically, one might say. Very intelligent, these Chinese, very intelligent. The Westerners, the white people, here it means white people, they use very complex, here it's very simplified, but they use a very complex way of explaining what the Chinese, they draw in 2 minutes, so shut up, just look at our symbols, you don't need to talk. That's why the image of the wise Chinese person is a silent, etc. Not always a silent, these Chinese, sometimes they make a lot of noise, but that's a joke, that's a joke. No, but seriously, that's how it works, basically. That's very useful, this symbol. Then, okay, tolerance and order. Tolerance can bring about chaos, which is indistinction, indeterminateness, etc., etc. And the logical revolt against too much tolerance, against an excess of tolerance, is a restoration of order. That's why there is a revival of the right in the Western world. That's why people... And the people who want order, usually they contain within their mind all the previous determination. Usually they are males, either rebellious whites or old white people. They tend towards racism. They favor family, country, civilization. They are adept of trash talking. They put an emphasis on the question of IQ. They want free speech, etc., etc. Yeah. Cultural Marxism, which is the unity of all the previous determination, if I have to simplify. No, I will switch a little bit on this side. Yeah. Cultural Marxism, the reaction that it brings is traditionalism. That's why in the modern Western world there is a traditionalist revival, traditionalist femininity. I'm not saying that all women are on the left and all males are on the right. These are principles, but the women on the right, they are becoming more traditional. They are revolting against feminism and adopting a more traditionalist perspective. Stella, I think about you. Yeah. The woke ideology. It's kind of a cultural Marxism, woke ideology that's kind of identical, although different, but it's kind of in the same basket. I'm looking at the picture, yeah. The reaction is what is called the red pill, which is people becoming aware, rediscovering their roots, their identity, reforming, re-establishing their identity, and becoming smart again and revolting against the system. But the system and the revolt, this is the phenomenal appearance of spirit. This is what I've been talking about for many minutes now. This is a vaguely rigorous presentation of the fundamental determinations of what people call the red pill. It's not in a chronological order, it's in a logical, structural order. Yeah. No, I will just modify a little bit the camera. The video will be very long, but maybe I will stop the video and I will make a separate video. Yeah, maybe I will just conclude the commentary and then I will comment I will do this because if it's too long people will not watch the video. So yeah, do we see? Yeah, so the woke ideology or cultural Marxism, it brings about the red pill. Promiscuity, namely the hookup culture, the consequences of feminism and the micto. I mean, men have always been promiscuous, but the promiscuity of women is a modern phenomenon, and the idea that women can sleep around with no long-term attachment, it's negative for them, and it brings about a downfall of birth rates and social problems of all sorts, of irresponsibility, dependence, the welfare state, etc., etc. And the reaction, it's cosmic order being restored in a way. It's a switch towards marriage. There are more and more women in the Western world who say, okay, feminism was a mistake, I don't want to sleep around with dozens of guys, because first, not all women are pretty enough to do this, but also because marriage brings about stability, marital virtue, economic efficiency, emotional stability, social greatness. Eventually, this is partly what has made Western societies great, namely stable marriages between a man, his wife, and their children. And there is a restoration. It's quantitatively very limited as of now, but what is intense has to be extended, and the idea of marriage has been extended throughout most of civilized history because it's intensive in the sense that it's a good idea, because it brings about stability. Because a society where there are only feminists and miktos, broken marriages, broken household, single mothers, incels, etc., it's a society which is completely dysfunctional at most levels: economic, political, social, intellectual, religious, etc., etc. That's why promiscuity, after decades of promiscuity, there is a revival towards the value of marriage. I just explained how people structure their life. Degeneracy. Well, degeneracy are the excesses of the sexual liberation, one might say, but not only sexual liberation, it's also degeneracy in terms of abuse of drugs, excesses of alcohols, and the negative antisocial behaviors of all sorts. It brings about a restoration of virtue. Virtue is the totality of these ideas and being willing to defend these ideas. There's a revival of virtue, but virtue, if it's excessive, can degenerate into excessive. There are historical examples, Savonarola, Cromwell partly, the excesses of Puritanism in America, Robespierre. There are many religious reformers who are a little bit excessive, and they bring about not moral degeneracy but social troubles. So virtue has to be properly balanced in the sense that in the middle there would be a virtuous behavior while acknowledging the flaws, one might say, of human nature. It has to be a realistic anthropology, not to demand too much of humans. The excesses of Puritanism, it can work on a anthropologically Anglo-Saxon population, but it cannot be universalized necessarily, so it has to be realistic. Then socialism. Most Western countries have become socialist by an increasing proportion of their economic system, the education of the welfare state, taking care of roads, pension, healthcare, has become socialized. And the reaction, because of the inherent flaws of socialism, is a revival of free market ideas. Here, the American context is really specific, because even when America becomes socialist, it's still more free market than most countries. But the socialization of economy and of the entire social life is a trend which has been prevalent in the Western world since the end of the Second World War, and because of a system brings about its own negativity. Here it's not moral negativity, it's simply the negation. Here it's kind of for good. The Marxists say capitalism brings about socialism for inherent reason, but in excess of socialism it also brings about striving towards more freedom, and we have the freedom of speech, the freedom of the individual, and here that's freedom in economics. That's why the libertarian ideals are gaining ground. It's statistically, quantitatively not very significant, but the ideas are powerful, and anyone interested in improving the society where he or she lives, by reading good American books about economics, he or she will understand that socialism has consistently been a failure. That's why this knowledge is made available for everyone. Anyone on this planet who wants to improve the economic condition of the country where she lives, you want the recipe for success, for economic success, don't promote socialism. This knowledge is made available for everyone. If African countries want to improve their GDP, if Asian countries want to compete with Western countries, if Western countries want to cease to be decadent, if Southern American countries want to improve, everyone can know, here's the reason why many countries fail economically, the reason why most countries who are successful are successful. There are other reasons. It's not just the formal economic policy that would be too easy. There's also the population, the origin of the population, the moral virtue, the religious values, the psychology, etc. There are many other determinations, but yeah. The knowledge that socialism has been an economic failure for the past 2 centuries, wherever or almost everywhere where it has been attempted, not only economic failure, there is also the political, etc., is being made available for everyone potentially. People they can look at the economic results of capitalism, the economic results of socialism, and then they can decide what's better. And only America produces the infrastructure, namely the internet, and the knowledge, namely the American scholars, scientists, researcher, to help improve potentially everyone. Only America does this. So Marxism and libertarianism, that's kind of the same idea. The sociological structure, it's partly tied with this, but here in a more simplified way, or the elites and the underclass on the left in the modern Western world. The left is the unity of the economic elites and the underclass, which are bought by the elites through the welfare state, and the right, it's mostly the middle class and the working class, the native population, white people. So it's white elites and partly white but partly non-white underclass versus a white middle class and a white working class in most Western countries. Of course, here it's very simplified, but that's the trend. That's Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump. What the left calls the populists, this is simply the people who are willing to defend the interest of the middle class and the working class, the natives, the white people of the middle class and working class. This is the fundamental sociological determination. If I had to simplify, those who are in power in most Western countries are the elites, and they are in power because they feed the underclass with food stamps, social welfare program, and they keep the middle class in the middle with moralistic values like ecology, tolerance, etc. That's how it works. And populism, the rise of the right, is simply those who defend the interest of the middle class and the working class of native white people. This is the sociological determination of most Western countries, all Western countries. This is what sometimes people call anarcho-tyranny. Then the media, most media, almost all the official media, they are on the left. Here it's not for the good. And the social media, they are mostly on the right. There's a radical shift towards the right on social media. Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, BitChute, TikTok, etc. TikTok is not always right-wing, but there's a radical shift towards the right because the knowledge that has been kept by the system for decades is being made available, and necessarily new knowledge brings new perspective, and the new perspective is right-wing because it's opposed to the prevalent state of economic, political, anthropological, sociological conditions. So there's a switch towards the right on social media. That's why they are called to control and to censor, and that's why the left, in everyday newspaper all over the Western world, they complain about free speech, because free speech brings about a new perspective which threatens the power structure. It's simply how it works. The warfare state is on the left, namely through the taxes of the taxpayer, the welfare state, which encourages the underclass, and all these political, anthropological, cultural aspects, and the warfare state, that which enabled the war machine to wage war abroad or against the native people, is financed by the taxpayers, and there's a revolt against this, mostly in the US, for people like Ron Paul and the libertarian, who criticize banking, because it is banking and fiat money, etc., which enable the system to function as it is. So that's why, in terms of virtue signaling, people who want to fight against the system, they just have to say, like Ron Paul does, but you pretend to be virtuous, but through your taxes and your money, you finance war of destructions in non-white countries, the Middle East, Africa, Southern America, etc. That's why virtue signaling can be used by the right, the libertarians, to defeat the left by saying, you pretend to be moral, but look at how many people have been killed in the Middle East through welfare, warfare policies, etc., etc. Then ecology and technology. Ecology usually is on the left in terms of virtue signaling. Technology is not political, but the technological entrepreneurs, they are usually right-wingers, not politically, but the ideal of entrepreneurship, creativity, it's more right-wing, but actually here it's really not political. But what I mean is ecology is used as virtue signaling usually by the left, and we read this every day, global warming, climate change, etc., etc. But when people are willing to take the necessary measure to reduce climate change, global warming, waste, etc., etc., they become radical. So that's why there are the real ecologists. They can be on the left if they are serious, but they can also be on the right. And here it's beyond economic consideration, because the real ecologists, they care about sustainability independently of economic prosperity sometimes. That's why, but those who complain about the ecological problems and the problems brought about by capitalism, they use technology to share their ideas. That's what sometimes they tend to forget. I don't. I know that without technology, all the knowledge about the ecological crisis would not be made available. Yeah. Okay, then. Another, in a term of geopolitics or politics, there is an opposition between globalism and nationalism. This is what structures, again, the life. We see this daily on the news. The globalists, they do not call themselves globalists, but they complain about the nationalists, and the nationalists complain about the globalists. But if all the nations revolt against the globalists, while being aware, because of the development of knowledge on the internet, this will be real globalism. And here it's philosophically serious, namely, globalism is abstract universality. It's a global citizenship, the universal human with no attachment to any particularities. And this abstraction, because it is disconnected from the particularities and the singular, predominantly the particularities, but a human being with no particularities, just a singular individual, which is taught and told, you are a global citizen, you have no moral right to be attached to your ancestry, your culture, your ethnicity, your civilization, your tradition, etc. He revolts because it's completely abstract. And if most white countries or white people revolt against, they don't do this, but a lot of them do, they revolt against globalism, it means that most particular of the universal mankind, namely if the Canadians revolt against globalism, the Americans, the French, the Germans, the English, the Australians, it is what they do on the right. But when all the particulars revolt against the abstract universal to assert their identity, this is precisely what brings about the movement of spirit, because those who revolt against globalism, they produce unconsciously, they produce knowledge, or either they produce knowledge which has a consequence to revolt against globalism, or by revolting against globalism consciously they produce knowledge, so it works both ways. But a global nationalism is not a global conflict of all the nations against one another. It's simply mankind can become global, really global in a good sense, when each individual has acquired a knowledge and understanding of his or her own tradition, ethnic, religious, cultural, etc., etc. And this process of acquiring knowledge is predominantly made available by the revolt of the individual against this abstract entity that which we call globalism. And this is, here it's very complex for people who are not trained. This is precisely the conspiracy. The conspiracy theorists, usually they are on the right and they revolt against the deep state. They do not call this the deep state, but against what they call the elites, the bankers, the invisible government, etc. But they see on this side, they see what they call the elite. I mean, they do not see them physically, but they think about the elite, but they do not see the entire process. Namely, in conspiracy there is spear, the same as in spirit, And the movement of spirit is precisely the totality of the life, the intellectual, political, anthropological life of the West, which, because knowledge is universal, it's actually the life, the intellectual and spiritual life of the world. So the conspiracy, they think on this side, they think that the conspirators are on this side, but actually the movement of spirit, here I'm talking to myself because there's only my spirit eventually, the movement of spirit is precisely the movement of revolt against the current state of things, and the spiritual life is a movement of negation and re-establishing one's own identity, and that's why we live a religious age, because the conspiracy is the unfolding of the conspiracy, the uncovering of the conspiracy, the denunciation of the conspiracy, the revelation of the conspiracy. This is the conspiracy. Because, yeah, and in geopolitics there is an opposition between West and East, between North and South, and they are conceptually united as well. This is the transcription in realm of geopolitics of all the previous determinations. This is why there are tensions between the US and China, between NATO and Russia, between the economically privileged North and the economically deprived South, etc., etc. That's why there are opposition at all levels, but on the right, it's a revolt against the dominance over the past decades of what is on the left. This is what shapes and structures the life of spirit, of the intellect, of the life of God, eventually, in the Western world at large and in the world at large. Yeah, that's why we are living an age of revelation, which means apocalypse in ancient Greece. And this is the movement, it's very simplified, but the movement of the life of spirit. And eventually every human being is incorporated within these categories. Here it's specific to the Western world, but most Western people living in Western countries, their intellectual life, when they are not plunged in the immediacy of the daily life, when they can think about something broader, they are structured by this determination. You are either a male or a female. You don't have to be a feminist or a micto, but this is a tendency. Yeah, you are either anti-racist or racist. You do not have to say, I'm an anti-racist or I'm a racist, but people, they tend to be rather on the side of anti-racism or the side of racism. Here it's really simplified, but there is a continuum for all the categories. Either they are using newspeak or using trash talking, publicly or privately. Either they want more collectivism or more individualism. They do not necessarily use this word or think even like this, but this is how they are structured. They are in favor of promiscuity or the restoration of marriage. They are Marxist or libertarians, etc., etc. This is the conceptual map, the conceptual structure. It's very simplified, but which help people understand themselves and understand the world in which they live. It's rather structured, but it's not very rigorous, but it's the best balance of intellectual requirements and accessibility that I've been able to produce without working too much on this, because I work on other things, but this is the simplified presentation of the life of spirit in the Western world in the 21st century. Yeah. Okay, I intend to make other videos about the other parts of the system, but I will stop now. I will work during the night. I work at night time because I'm in a mood to work. Yeah, I will not upload the video. I will upload the video but not post the video immediately, precisely because I will work. But this is what I could say. Yeah, and this is particular to the Western world, but this is also, spirit by its very nature is universal in a sense that the knowledge about male and female relationship, about race, about ethics in terms of family life, etc., etc., about intelligence, about politics, about again, ethics, morality, etc., about economics, this knowledge is unconsciously being produced. It's being produced unconsciously in the sense that the people who produce this knowledge through their videos, their speeches, their books, their research, etc., they are not aware of the whole process, and they are also not aware that it is universal in the sense that anyone with an internet connection in Zimbabwe or Colombia or Thailand, they can have access to this. Here it's just the format, but the content, here, the educational system, where is it? Educational standards, this book, anyone with an internet connection can look at this book and they will learn the problems in the American educational system, what is good in terms of efficiency, efficacy, success, and what is wrong or bad in terms of inefficiency, problems, etc., and draw inspiration, here in the ordinary sense, to improve the economic, the educational system and also the economic system of his or her own country. That's why we live in an age of potentialities for the good, because the totality of world knowledge, the errors of the past, the successes of the past, the hopes of the future for the good, etc., are made available, and I am just trying to share the structure, the formal structure of the totality. This is what I've been trying to do for many months. I have consistently failed, but even it's very simplified. It's just my view. It's not randomly structured. I've used the works, the encyclopedia, the works of Hegel, but this is the view, and this helps explain how people behave collectively, publicly, intellectually in the Western world. And I know that the truth is in the middle, but the truth is not stable. The truth is a process, and the process is a shift towards the right. So the zeitgeist, the movement of the spirit of the times, is a switch towards the right. This is what explains the political views. But when people understand that they are kind of determined to switch on the right, and that the truth, which is common sense, is in the middle, they can try to alleviate the switch towards the right to favor the proper balance in the middle. But it has nonetheless to switch towards the right for the sake of cosmic order, cosmic balance, in a way. And just an example to illustrate this, racism. It's a revolt against the excesses of anti-racism, and if it's not checked, it can go into extreme racist fanaticism. The proper balance is simply in the middle, namely common sense is race realism, because race realism is simply science, and every human being, as a thinking human, can talk peacefully. If he's explained correctly, can talk peacefully about race, and can help solve a lot of problems, just to acknowledge that human beings are diverse. Really, the left, they talk about diversity all the time, but when the right talk about genetic diversity, they do this seriously, not morally but scientifically. But then, usually the left, they reject this. But if human beings could speak collectively, peacefully, just about the question of race, they need to acknowledge that we as a species, I start talking like a human, we as a species, we are diverse, and that the behaviors of humans are determined partly, not completely, but partly, for good or for bad, by racial and genetic determinations. It would help appease a lot of problems, because it would shed light and clarity and understanding. That's just a first step, but that's just one of the useful aspects. So that's what I will do, because no one else. That's connected with what I've been doing recently. I've understood that I have to trust myself for the good. I'm not completely worthless as an individual. I have good ideas, and if no one is willing or capable, maybe they are not capable, I've started to say I will stop thinking that everyone is better than me and I'm completely worthless. I have my role to play, not just for the negative. I am the negative, but I'm not just negative, precisely because the negative and the positive are conceptually united. So I've decided to trust myself and to be willing to assert my ideas, all my ideas, good and bad, but here I will think with one of my, not my best ideas, but one of my most useful ideas, namely to show the presentation of the life of spirit in the Western world, in the world at large, which is my spirit, because there's only one spirit, but it is being made manifest through countless, hundreds of millions, billions of humans, but in the Western world it's millions, because very few people are awakened. That would be the red pill, but eventually it can reach hundreds of millions, just to understand the life, the collective life of the spirit of God, eventually. So that's my current contribution, and I will keep using this document as long as I make public videos. Maybe if I have the opportunity, I will improve the document. If not, others will improve with their own perspective. But this can help structure a lot, because when one understands that it's reciprocally determining one another, one way out of the conceptual insanity is to stand in the middle, either through being to ignore willingly, not to ignore like in term ignorant, but to ignore willingly, like namely the talk between. Here I will explain the useful aspect of it. The Democrats and the Republicans, whether these are the Democrats and the Republicans of the US or of England or Canada or France or Germany or any country, it's just talk. It's a ping pong match. It's just boring at some moment. When one understands the trick, one says, okay, I'm neither a Democrat nor a Republican in terms of politics, politician politics as I call this. I will stand not in the middle, but I will do something more productive instead of wasting my time following politics, going to vote, going to meetings, rallies, instead of wasting my time for a ping pong match with no interest. I will do something productive, like studying the life of spirit, for instance, or picking up the trash in the street, to do virtue signaling, to clean the streets, or studying one's own psychology by watching videos on the internet. There are many fascinating things to do. Yeah, but here it's really the formal presentation, the conceptual frame of the life of, I would say, our spirit. Whoever you are, this is our spirit, this is my spirit. This is how I envision things. It's not very rigorous, but it's systematic nonetheless. Then there is art, religion, and philosophy, which express the view of the totality, but this is simply what I call the Phenomenology of Spirit. Not the book by Hegel, but the phenomenal appearance of spirit. And it can help people understand themselves, understand their opponents, understand one another, and yeah, the times in which we live, it's a shift towards the right to restore an excess of the left of the past decade. So it's a right-wing movement, that's the movement of spirit, but eventually, when the excesses were on the left and the balance is being restored on the right, the truth has to be at some moment in the middle. In the middle, that's the symbol of a, not prayer, but a Buddhist meditation, maybe in the middle, and it's not completely random. Namely, I've taken an example. The middle between anti-racism and racism is race realism. That's I will say something intelligent. I hadn't planned to say this, but here is a little bit of spontaneous intelligence. That's Aufhebung in German. Very intelligent, these Germans. A little bit of nationalism, we don't see. It will remain hidden for now, the German nationalist aspect of... Well, let's hope so, because there are some aspects of German nationalism that we would prefer not to, please, no. That's a joke. No, but seriously, that's Aufhebung, namely, race realism is the negation of anti-racism, because it brings about a scientific aspect which is defended by the racist, but it's also a negation of racism, because if there can be dispassionate speeches about race, intelligent discourse, mutual exchange between people of the same race but of various ethnic and various racial groups, to talk intelligently about race, namely we are diverse, different groups are diverse, there is diversity within each group, it will be a negation of racism, because it will dispassionate the debate, and that will be a unity of both, but which is being transcended, namely human beings will be able to freely dispassionately, intelligently, scientifically, interestingly, fascinatingly maybe, talk about race. That's one example. Yeah. And yeah, that's what I had to say in 2 hours and 30 minutes. Now I will drink a glass of water that I will appreciate. And I'm in a mood to keep working, so I will make another video with a shorter introduction, but I will comment my other documents. During the night, yeah, I work at night time. I'm a worker! The Americans taught me to work harder. Elon Musk, Britney Spears, the average American mentality, of course. Yeah, very intelligent, these Americans. I will start the video now. And